Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? The Saints wrapped up mini camp on Thursday. And part of this mini camp, we knew that the Saints had several tryout players. And they have, in fact, signed 3 of their tryout players. And I want to run through each of them. We could talk a little bit about it here, but not in signing 3, they also had to waive 3 players as well. So we'll talk about the players that they waived, not really of great significance. It's just the ones that had to go. Yasir Durant, the offensive lineman, wide receiver Malik Flowers, and running back Sir Roderick Thompson. Those are the 3 that were waived in order to make room for center Billy Price, wide receiver Lynn Bowden, who's someone we did discuss earlier this week, and wide receiver Keke Coutee, who also worked out for the Saints this week. Okay, so let me take a minute here and talk about each of them, and I'll start with Billy Price. And I think this one is maybe, of the 3, the most significant. Billy Price was a former first-round pick. He was a first-round pick of Cincinnati back in 2018. And he's a guy that has played a lot of football since he's come into the NFL. Now, he had some injuries early in his career, which cost him his opportunity early, but he has played 69 career games. He has started 45 times, and he has played all 3 interior offensive line positions, center and both guard spots. As a matter of fact, last year in 2022, he finished the season with the Arizona Cardinals and ended up playing center for the final 11 games of the season there in Arizona. So you're talking about a guy here who has valuable experience at center and both guard spots, is a talented enough player that when he was coming out of college was a first-round draft pick. While he has had some injuries, he's also played a ton, and he continues to get opportunities. The other thing I'll remind you is when Arizona signed him to finish last season at center, they signed him off of the Raiders practice squad. So yet again, the Derek Carr impact is being felt. We talked about Lynn Bowden, another player we're just about to talk about in a second, who was drafted by the Raiders and was traded before he ever played. But here's Billy Price, again, another guy that was on the Raiders practice squad, got signed off the practice squad by Arizona, finished the season there. Now he's in New Orleans, reunited with Derek Carr. So for that very obvious tie, Foster Moreau, Brian Edwards, Billy Price, Lynn Bowden, we can go down the list of guys that played with Derek Carr with the Raiders who are now with the New Orleans Saints. He is very clearly helping the Saints handpick some guys that he really likes a lot. Price, I think, could be significant, and I don't want to overreact, but one of the things we often talk about, of course, is that the interior offensive line, or just offensive line positions for that matter, it's the highest injury rate per position in the NFL. So you need depth. And we see it every year where you need depth on the offensive line, and more than depth, you need versatility. Typically, you've got your 5 starters, and then you've got 2 or 3 guys that give you depth. A guy that could give you depth as a rotating tackle, someone that can give you depth on the interior, or maybe a swing guy that can play on either side of the line or center like Billy Price, who can play 3 positions for you. And I'll remind you, when Maddie Hudak was here with us giving us our camp report, she mentioned Andrus Peat playing left tackle, something we've seen him do in a pinch this year during his career, backing up Teron Armstead as a left tackle. We saw Cesar Ruiz when Eric McCoy was hurt in 2021 and he missed 4 games. It was Ruiz who slid from guard to center, backing up Eric McCoy. And that may still be the preferred option. But if you have a guy like Billy Price on your roster giving you depth, then he could either play center, or if you slide Ruiz to center, Price plays guard, where he's played plenty in his career. You see what I'm saying? Like, you have a versatile piece that as you start to move the pieces on the chessboard, you've got a guy that where versatility is so valuable is able to do that immediately. So that is, I think, potentially the one that's most significant, because in the last 2 years, we've seen every one of the New Orleans Saints starting offensive linemen injured and missed time at some point, except for Cesar Ruiz last year, who was like the Iron Man and played every game. The other two players are both receivers. Moose, do me a favor. Give me the cut from yesterday of Dennis Allen talking about the competition in this minicamp, because I want you to hear it, because he mentions three positions, and there's one in particular. Two I somewhat brushed aside, one as sort of obvious, and there was one that I kind of pushed back and said, if you have competition at cornerback, that's a problem, because you should go into the season knowing who your starting defensive backs are. And if you don't know that, that's a problem. But listen to what Dennis Allen said.
I think there's a lot of competition in a lot of different areas. You know, kicker being one of them. I think there's some good competition in the defensive backfield. I think there's some good competition at the wide receiver position. So I was saying the other day, I feel like we've got some pretty good depth in terms of the start of training camp. So that's one of the things that has me excited.
You're going to hear me say this a bunch between now and when the final or the first 53-man roster is revealed. We can be very high on this group of receivers because of what their potential is. Chris Olave could take another step towards superstardom. Michael Thomas could be back healthy and look like the guy he did in the first 4 years of his career. Rashid Shaheed could be the blow the top off the defense guy consistently over 17 weeks. All those things could happen. Or Chris Olave could have a sophomore slump. Michael Thomas could get injured again. Rashid Shaheed could not live up to the promise, considering there's more film out on him now. You all know how I feel about Tre'Quan Smith. A.T. Perry, the rookie from Wake Forest, I'm very high on him, but can he make the transition to the NFL? We'll see. And you brought in Brian Edwards via free agency. You have James Washington via free agency. You've got a lot of options at receiver. A lot of them. And what seems like a lot of really good options at receiver. But we will not know the answer to that until they actually go play. It's not like a year ago when you started the season with first-round draft pick Chris Olave, Michael Thomas coming off of injury, and we were excited because he was finally back, and Jarvis Landry. You knew, boom, who your dudes were. Now, Thomas and Jarvis got hurt. Olave had a great year, and then you were seeking out other options, right? We were talking last year, man, Marquez Callaway, who 2 years ago became your number one receiver with all the injuries. He was your fourth, at best, he was your fourth best receiver. Like, that showed the depth they had a year ago. We saw how it went. So will it go poorly again this year? Will guys stay healthy and live up to the potential? The fact that the Saints keep adding more receivers, to me, is validation of the question of the concern that they're not exactly sure what they have with these guys. Now, we talked about Lynn Bowden when they were bringing him in. Lynn Bowden is a super dynamic guy who was it was drafted in the third round by the Raiders in 2020. Before he ever played for the Raiders, they traded him to Miami. He's bounced around a little bit due to injury, but when he's been on the field, he's been productive. He was a super versatile, dynamic guy at Kentucky. And Keke Coutee finished this last year with the Indianapolis Colts. He played for the Texans from 2018 to 2020. He was a guy that was a fourth-round draft pick. So you're talking about guys that have NFL experience, and I like that you've brought in James Washington, you've brought in Brian Edwards, you've got Lynn Bowden, you've got Keke Coutee, you've got guys that are young NFL veterans that are going to potentially try to beat out some of these young guys trying to earn a roster spot and see if they can get their spot on the field. So there is going to be great competition at the receiver position, and I would tell you that I think that is the most interesting position battle that's going to wage in training camp whenever they start, because it certainly feels like the only thing that's a certainty there is Chris Olave. It feels like everything else would be up for grabs. Now, if Michael Thomas is healthy, he's a certainty as well, but that's a giant if at this point. So Saints wave 3, sign 3, center Billy Price, and wide receivers Lynn Bowden and Keke Coutee coming out of their minicamp this week. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.